Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the class of mathematics. Today we are going to discuss about cycle. But firstly, I would like to remind you to subscribe on my YouTube channel, what we call Sanfaume Online. Make sure you subscribe on it to get more tutorial video concerning with mathematics. Let us start. Okay, first of all, you have to understand the concept of cycle. What is a cycle? Cycle, it is a circular path with equal distance from the center, or we say it is a closed path which is equal distance from the center. As you see, this is a closed path, but for this closed path, in order to be a cycle, it must have equal distance from the center. Assume this one is a center O. Then from there, if the distance from this O up to this point of the circumference is equal to this one up to another point of the circumference, and also equal to this one up to another point of the circumference, then if this distance, let's say this is A, this is B, this is C, if this OA is equal to OB and also is equal to OC, then I say this one is a cycle. So simply, cycle is a closed path with equal distance from the center. For instance here, OA must be equal to OB must be equal to OC. As you see here, OA equal to OB equal to OC, which is equal to radius, because we know this one will be the radius. Then from there, this one will be the cycle. So any closed path with equal distance from the center is called the cycle. Okay, let us check on the definition of terms found on the topic of the cycle. Okay, from this topic of cycle, there's some definition of terms. The first one is radius. What is a radius? Radius, that is just a distance from the center of a cycle to the point of the circumference of a cycle. As you see here, this one is the center of a cycle, this is the point of the circumference of a cycle. So the distance from this one to this one is what we call the radius. Even the distance from this one to this one is what we call the radius, and this one also called radius. And always presented by the small letter r. The small letter r presented with the radius. So what is a radius? Radius is the distance from the center of a cycle to the point of the circumference of a cycle. The second terminology is a diameter. This one, it is a diameter. So what is a diameter? Diameter, that is a distance from the center of the cycle to the circumference of a cycle multiplied by 2. So when you take the distance from the center of a cycle, let's say this one, when you take the distance from the center of the cycle to the circumference of a cycle, then you multiply this distance by 2, you will find the radius. That's why simply we say diameter, this is a distance through the center of the cycle and pass through 2 distinct points. Let's say this is point A and this is point P. Let us check on the definition here. It says that diameter is a line segment through the center of a cycle joining 2 points of the circumference. So line segment through the center of a cycle, as you see here, through the center of the cycle, and they touch 2 different points of the circumference, as you see, the first point, the second point. So this one is what we call the diameter. Another terminology is a chord. So what is a chord? Chord, assume this is your cycle. Chord is any line segment which divides the cycle into 2 parts. For instance, this is a cycle with a center O. Then any line segment which divides this cycle into 2 parts is what we call the chord. So this is our cycle. So if there is a certain segment line which divides this cycle into 2 parts, that line is what we call the chord. Let's say this one. It divides the cycle into 2 parts. The first part here and the second part here. This is the first part, this is the second part. So since this line divides the cycle into 2 parts, first part and the second part, then I can call this line is a chord. That's why this line A, B, this one is a chord, because it divides the cycle into 2 parts, first part and the second part. Okay, that is the concept of a chord. So chord is any line which divides the cycle into 2 parts, and is a part which is divided by the chord is what we call a segment. So here we have the first segment and this is a second segment. You have to note it. We shall discuss it on the next page, concept of segment. Simply, it is a region made by the chord. This is a chord, this region made by this chord, and the part of the circumference, what we call the segment, and this one is a segment. So put on your mind that always chord divides the cycle into two segments, as you see here, first segment, second segment. Okay, let us continue. Another terminology here is a tangent. So you have to know what is a tangent. What is the meaning of the tangent? This tangent is a line which touches the cycle outside at only one point. So any line which touches the cycle outside at only one point is what we call a tangent. For instance, this is a cycle with the center O. If there's any line which touches this cycle outside at only one point, then this line is what we call the tangent. So this line is a tangent because it touches the cycle outside at only one point. So I can say this line AB is a tangent. But it is not only that, even this one, this line is a tangent because it touches the cycle at only one point outside. So even this one also is a tangent. So tangent is any line which touch outside the cycle at only one point. Otherwise, that is not a tangent. So also even this one is a tangent. Let's say tangent KL. It is a tangent. Any line touched outside the cycle at only one point, we call it a tangent. Okay, let us continue. Another terminology here is segment. What is a segment? As I said before, segment, this is a part of the cycle or region found on a cycle made up by the chord and a part of the circumference. Assume this is a cycle and you have a certain chord. Let's say this one is a chord. Then always chord divides the cycle into two segments. So this is the first segment here, this is the second segment. From there, I will find two segments. The question is that, what is a segment? So I can say segment, this is a region found on a cycle made up by the chord and the part of the circumference. Why I say part of the circumference? Because the total length from here around up to this point is not a circumference. We know the circumference is a total distance from here up to this around the whole cycle. So this one is just a part of the circumference. So the region made up by the part of the circumference and is a chord, this region is called a segment. Even if this one second segment, this is a region made up by the chord and the part of the circumference. Okay, so that is a concept of chord. Always chord divides the cycle into two segments, and from there, segment, this is a region found on a cycle made up by the chord and the part of the circumference. Sometimes this part of the circumference is what we call an arc. We shall discuss it later. Sometimes this part of the circumference, we call it an arc. We shall check it. Okay, let us go on. Out from there, there's another terminology called secant. Yeah, called sector. This one, the second terminology, we call it a sector. What is a sector? Sector is a region found on a cycle made up by two radii. For instance, you have something like this one is your cycle with a certain center, let's say center O. Then this one is a first radii and this one is a second radii. Okay, this one is a first radii, this one is a second radii. The region made up by these two radii is what we call the sector. This means this region is called a sector because it made up by two radii. First radii here, second radii here. So this is a sector. By definition, what is a sector? What is a sector? This one is a region of the cycle made up by the two radii. So region of a cycle made up by the two radii, as you see, first radii, second radii. So this region is what we call the sector. Okay, let us continue. Another terminology here is an arc. So what is arc? Arc is a part of the circumference. When you say this is an arc, means part of the circumference. For instance, you have a cycle, consider this cycle, from this cycle with the center O, let's say O is the center of this cycle, then the total distance from this point around up to this point again is what we call the circumference. But how about the distance from this point up to this point? What is that? That is what we call an arc. So an arc is just a part of the circumference, because we know the whole rotation here is what we call the circumference of a cycle, but the part of this rotation from here rotate up to this point, this length from this one up to this one, this is what we call the arc. So what is an arc? An arc, this is a part of the circumference of the cycle. So if you have a certain radius here and you have the certain radius here, this distance is what we call an arc. So in other language, I can say, if you remember, the region made up by the two radii, like this one, first radii, second radii, is what we call a sector. So sector, sometimes you can say, is a region made up by two radii and an arc, or you can say sector is a region made up by the two radii and the part of the circumference, because we know an arc is a part of the circumference. Only that. Let us continue with the secant. So what is a secant? Simply, secant, this one is a line which cuts two distant points of a cycle. So suppose you have a cycle like this one. This is a cycle, and the line which cuts two distant points of a cycle is what we call the secant line. So assume this is a center O, and if we have a certain line which cuts two parts of a cycle, let's say this line, let me call it line QP. This line QP cuts the cycle at two distant points, this first point and this second point. That's why I say this line QP is what we call the secant line, because it cuts the cycle at 2 points. Note that there is a secant line and there is a chord. This is two different things. Assume here there's a certain point, let's say A, and here there's a certain point, let's say B. Then the distance from this point A to this point B, this distance is what we call a chord. But the distance from point Q up to point P, this one is what we call the secant line, or the distance QABP is called the secant line. But this distance from A up to B is what we call the chord. So do not confuse on it. Always secant exceeds the circumference, as this one exceeds the circumference of a cycle, but chord must be inside of the cycle, do not exceed the circumference of a cycle. That's why this AB is a chord, while QP is what we call the secant line. Okay, let us go on. Now it is exercise. From this exercise, you have to determine which one is a chord, which one is a tangent, which one is a secant line, and the all properties of a cycle. For instance, this distance from point A up to point B is what we call the chord. This is a chord because it divides the cycle into two parts, the first part here and the second part here. But this distance, this line FT, or this distance of T, this line FT is what we call the secant line. This is the secant line because it cuts the cycle at 2 points. That's why you call it a secant. On top of that, this one, what is this? It is a tangent. Line RQ is a tangent because this is a line segment which touches the cycle outside at only 1 point. That's why I can call this RQ as a tangent. And also this is a radius. This region is what we call a sector, and even this one is what we call a sector because it is made up by two radii. As I said before, sector is a region found on a cycle made up by the two radii. Okay, this one will be the end of my presentation, and this exercise, it is yours. You have to perform these questions. The lastly, I would like to remind you again, make sure you subscribe on my YouTube channel called Sanfaume Online. Goodbye.